The conscious emulation of nature's genius. How is 3.8 billion years of evolution solve the same problem that you're trying to solve? MBA is a obedience school. To be truly alone, it's a melting of conditioning. Sometimes you hear a word and your body's angst goes away. What is real is what is accepted by all life, not just humanity. Then they realize that it's not that they're not giving the data, they don't trust you. How does nature create trust? So they studied various pack animals. Why would somebody from another pack trust a member of another pack? These guys driving the planet, do they understand how the planet works? My personal view is that it is the final awakening.
Hello and welcome to the IC India podcast. It has been a wonderfully illuminating year with all its ups and downs. Through the course of the year, we've had the privilege of meeting guests from various walks of life who took us through the ins and outs of their respective worlds, awakening us to the different opportunities that exist beyond traditional careers and institutions.
And in today's episode, we have someone who, in his own words, is trying to find solutions to problems around us using nature's genius. He will take us through his journey into the immensely fascinating field of biomimicry and his active efforts towards growing it. Here's welcoming Prashant Dhawan, co-founder of Biomimicry India. So we are really excited to have Prashant with us today, and why don't we start with asking you about your background, and can you tell us about your life story? What got you here?
Simple but a very, very complicated question as far as I'm concerned. My life story is fairly different from the usual. I come from Delhi. I come from a middle class family, but quite early in life, we had a medical situation for my father. I had to learn how to take care and also take early responsibility. Very different life view that it gives you when you're in 8th standard and you have to earn your own school fee. At one level, you pretended to be a normal kid. At another level, you slipped to a different reality, which was your hidden secret. So why I'm giving you, because these things are very important. Most people define themselves in terms of what they have accumulated in terms of degrees and jobs. But is that who you are? I remember my first interview, which was with Radio Turkey or something, where I said I'm a father. And that's my first introduction, a Homo sapiens sapien. Most trivial, but most important. So I think that's where the journey begins. Who you are is not what you possess. I did my schooling and then I gave all my entrance exams like anybody would. And somebody who's in early life been given the role of becoming the caretaker of the family. Interestingly, I didn't know at that time what is important. What is important for me was my responsibility as a son. At that time, I got into IIT. I got into WITS. I got into all colleges. I still don't know how. Given the way I was conditioned, I took admission into Hansraj College, Delhi, because it was 300 meters from my house. And my evaluation matrix was I can take care of the family. You see. And my first class, my professor told me, you've lost your mind. So he said, what are the options you have? I said, I have to, but IIT is in, different place. For BIT, I have to leave. And then I said, I've also got into this college called SPA. I don't know what it is. He says, go there, at least professional degree. You'll get a professional degree. In storytelling, I can tell you whatever story you want. But that's how I got into architecture. Because Delhi mein hai, it's not very far. You can do both. And even during that, a lot of my personal journey had to do with personal responsibilities. But one good thing happened that during one of the 4th year sessions, I got involved. A senior of mine asked me if I would be willing to help him make a documentary. And I said, okay, sure. And he had some slides on the Gora and Khan tribes of Orissa. And that was the first time I learned about existence of people other than me, and their value system was completely different. So what had happened is at that time there was a Indira Awas Yojana where tribals had to be rehoused, and these documentaries were primarily to justify the success of the scheme. But the reality was it was a disaster. Those people had a certain way of living, a way of connecting with nature, and you give them asbestos covered barracks and call that housing. It had demolished not only their social structure, but they didn't know what to do with it. They were now prone to exploitation. So that started the journey of questioning what is real. What are we talking about? How do we even gauge what is true? Whom do I trust? That question stays with me. So the closest answer that is beginning to emerge in me was what is real is what is accepted by all life, not just humanity. So it should be true for the cyanobacteria. It should be true for the giraffe. It should be true for you. But you can't articulate it. You're young. You don't even know what you're seeking. So my life journey then went on. I graduated. I got into very low-paying, exploitative jobs. But whatever. So I went through these things. I took up jobs. I did whatever it is to make money. This is not a story of doing nice jobs, getting into nice colleges. I had to just do pure survival. In fact, if you were familiar with Delhi and you go to places like Chandni Chowk, Karol Bagh, Kamdanagar, I was probably the only architect from SPA working there because nobody else at that time felt, it's dignified. And since I didn't have social capital, political capital, or financial capital, so that's how the journey started. But everywhere, something in you is seeking the larger purpose of all this craziness, right? So that's where I feel destiny had something stored for me, that I would get these strange opportunities to do some voluntary work, and I would jump on it because it gave me some oxygen into this very mundane existence. So the next big thing that happened was I joined a company called LML, which was selling scooters, primarily because you get good salaries. Fortunately, the boss out there was a guy called Ravikant, who later on went on to become the head of Tata Motors and was instrumental in Nano. But I think these are real moments which build you, not the degrees. So what you experience, the people you meet. But let me just go a step back. But prior to that, an interesting thing had happened. I had got an assignment to document monasteries in Ladakh. At that time, that was quite exotic. This was completely out of the blue. I jumped on it, lived there for a month. And I think it's a situation we should try and seek out in our own lives to know what it is to be truly alone. When you stand up on a mountain and for miles and miles you see nothing, and after half an hour you just see a yak and you're so happy because you've seen a living creature, it changes your perspective of life and you begin to start seeing things as they are. To me it's a melting of conditioning, but it requires a certain amount of solitude. But these are the important things that happened. But even there was a sense that I was always suspicious of the decisions we make. Whom do I trust? So somewhere my body was telling me that you trust nature, but the word nature had not come in. I would say trust the place, ask the locals. There was something missing. There's an angst in the body. I don't know if you know, Sarah, a lot of artistic and creative people cannot express, but they feel angst. And their body tells them the angst goes away and they just know. They might make the story later. But I've met a lot of creative people. We share that once the angst goes, your body is told you, okay, yes, theek hai, you've got it. So the journey of beginning to feel that we are part of nature and the only thing is how do you figure it out in an unarticulated way had started. I got a glimpse of what corporate life is. Was pretty disillusioned. I honestly feel that MBA is a obedience school, And the problem is we say we need leaders. You need leaders, but you're training them as administrators. So there's a contradiction there itself. But nevertheless. So after that, another incident. I'm sharing with you an incident I haven't shared with anybody because now I think it's safe. So around 2000 or 1990, I think I forget. In this mundane thing, I again got a call that, do you want to do an exotic assignment? And I said, yeah, we are sending you on a train, get your camera. I had no clue kidhar ja raha hu, why. So I ended up in a place called Ayodhya. And after coming there, I realized that one day before somebody had demolished the structure and there was a full curfew. So I was in the center of one of the biggest transitioning movement in India. And alongside with me were a theatre artist called Habib Tanveer, Vivan Sundaram, who's a painter. Basically, the professor had told me, go with them. They are wanting to design an exhibition, help them. And they went to the house of Pakhavaj. Pakhavaj is like a mridangam. Pakhavaj player called Pagal Das. I'm telling you these things because I think I've been wanting to tell these things. Or everything else is bullshit. My degree is my own. So for me, it was semi-real. It was not true, but I was there in this very poor neighborhood with this very, very impoverished person who had all these, government gives this Sangeet, Samrat and all those awards. So we entered his house and this person just embraces and starts crying. I don't know these people. I'm just a bystander. But what is the conversation? So these people talk about what is this place? What are we trying to save? They didn't see the place in terms of just human ownership. And I saw that, these are moments you have to be there. And then I got my first, I think, true design brief. But that moment changed me because what is the place and what are we trying to revive and who are we to revive? A lot of these ideas were built not through the education and experience in conditioned world, but in these very basic encounters where people who were still very much rooted to the place, very much connected to nature, had a very different sense of worldview. But at the same time, you remember who I am. I am the guy who's got to take care of the family, who's got to... So till the age of 35, I was working almost from home. So at that time, I didn't know what to do with my life. I decided to apply for MBA. I did a 1-year MBA in ISB. Then I took up a job in Chennai with the Mahindra Holidays. Again, something very strange happened. 26 July 2005. You guys might not know the date, but that's the day the first floods in Mumbai happened. As Mahindra Holidays, I was working on developing a new product. And I had suggested that we should involve a foreign consultancy to help break the mindset. And somehow that got acknowledged. And I invited a team from a company called IDEO. They are based out of San Francisco in US. So they came and they met everybody. It was a nice meeting. I was supposed like a junior person to help make sure they're comfortable, take them to the airport, be with them. But what happened was 26 July and we got stuck in the rain. You want to make friends, lock people in a house and burn it. They'll be friends, right? But that led to a lot of good conversations. And somewhere after that, I left Mahindra's and I got a call from one of these guys that, what are you doing? And I said, I have no clue. And he says, so what about why I think you belong to IDEO. I said, I think so too. But I've got a very strange background. So they called me to interview with them in 2007. And I was there in San Francisco for a long time. And I was very, very fortunate, for somebody like me to meet. So I met everybody, Tim Brown, David Kelly, Tom Kelly. That was the time they were setting up the D school in Stanford. And I was just amazed. It was again surreal. Why am I here? And it was a great time because they don't interview. You just be there. And for 18 days, I was living with some of them, their families, going to various places. Very lucky to spend time with even Tim Brown and David Kelly. That's the, human-centered design was a big word. But in my private conversations with all these people, I could sense that there is a dissatisfaction with human-centrism. It was increasingly becoming consumer-centrism or market-centrism. So in all, what happened is they offered me a job. I was ecstatic. I thought finally it's all making sense. But for 2 years in a row, I didn't get my visa. Not because it was rejected, but those are the 2 years, 2006 and 7, they had a lottery system. And I took up a job with an institute where they were setting up something on human settlements. And in 2010, I came across the word biomimicry. The person I had worked with in IDEO called Robert Suarez, he was on the first cohort of biomimicry. As I told you, sometimes you hear a word and your body's angst goes away. Then it's up to you to find the words to express it, but your body is telling you that you've got it. So what to me was that it's not human centrism, but life centrism. And the big question is, how do you now tangibilize life centrism? So that's been my journey. So once we found what is biomimicry, I did the professional course and then I also got a degree from ASU. And since then, we've been teaching and trying to promote biomimicry in India.
It's really, really interesting in that one would have imagined that it was probably your early years and that you probably grew up around nature and had the opportunity to observe patterns and systems existing in nature up close. But it was actually much later in life, your philosophical line of questioning and a series of serendipitous opportunities coming your way that actually got you there. So, would that be fair? A fair assessment?
Partly. I would say my economic pursuits kept me away from nature in the early part of my life, but my personal pursuits connected me to nature. So, like where I lived in Delhi, that's very close to the Northern Ridge, if you're familiar with Delhi University. So, I would spend a lot of time in the Northern Ridge walking alone and being alone in nature. So the attachment to nature was always there, but it had no economic link. Biomimicry is kind of given me an economic identity. क्या करते हो? Biomimicry का. But if I was to tell you क्या करते हो, but you'd go to nature, nobody would even know, right? So that's the way we've designed the world.
Biomimicry as you define it or as you see it, how would you define that for someone who does not know anything about biomimicry?
As I would define it, I think I'm too small a person. Janine Benyus, who's the founder of Biomimicry, I think she's done a great job. The formal definition that we go by is the conscious emulation of nature's genius. So conscious means that you are no longer left it to chance or to arbitrariness. And when we say emulation, it is not a blind copying of nature. It is deeply rooted in context. And when we say nature's genius, that how is 3.8 billion years of evolution has solved the same problem that you're trying to solve. So to me, that is biomimicry. And I agree with that. Where I have a little bit of, again, say, bodily angst is that life, if you go to indigenous systems, whether they are the shamanic people, Amazon forests or Africa or India, for us, life is not, it doesn't end, in physicality. There are layers to it. When you're in dreamless state of sleep, you're still alive. So those are the questions that keep me excited. And I feel those are the new frontiers where answers will emerge. So what should be the economic system? What should be the social system? Shouldn't we be asking these questions? And whom do we ask? So let's ask nature. But for that, you need collaboration. You need a deeper understanding. And not being judgmental, let's ask everybody, Let's ask the scientist, let's ask the spiritual guy. What does life do to solve this problem? My personal view is that it is the final awakening. It is not a new thing, probably the oldest thing. But how do you, there's an African proverb, how do you awake a person who's pretending to be asleep? So that's the problem. Everybody's so much into the constructed identities. Most of the sustainability conferences you go to, do me a favor, you should ask them, sir, what are we trying to sustain? I asked this question 5 times. There'll be a lot of jargon. Finally, the only reason you're trying to sustain water or something is because that sustains life. If it doesn't sustain life, you don't sustain that. So what is sustainability? You're sustaining life. And what is life? Bio. Where is the biologist in this table? We are busy being busy. Missing the point. I think we need to not dissolve the walls. Whatever we are doing, actually we are trying to enhance life. So let's take the hard question. How do we enhance life? Life is bio. The smart question is, I think, how do we do it? Give us a systematic, structured way. That's the right question. So we get down to some meaningful work. Right now, I think we are answering the wrong questions because it's convenient. Funding has come.
I think I just had a follow-up question. So what kind of problems do you think are best suited to be solved with biomimicry, or what sort of problems are you focusing on right now?
See, my view is that biomimicry should be a mandatory foundation subject for everybody. Everything that we do, we should at least ask the question, what would nature do here? It is perfectly all right not to have the answer, not being able to implement the answer, even if you know it. But I think it's not all right not to have the question. So because biomimicry kind of tells us how do you live as a responsible species on this planet. I think we've got to get the fundamentals right. That first we educate ourselves, how do we exist on this planet as a species? On that foundation, you build everything else. And it's not very difficult. I would also dare to say 2024, while people are getting scared of open AI and all that, and they are saying what will happen to humanity, what will happen to our jobs. And so we should ask, what's the problem? Because most of the intellectual stuff AI can do. What can't AI do? AI can't do compassion, empathy. So what should a scientific mind do? That now, if you want to become a leader or you want to become a senior person, we should evaluate you on your empathy and compassion. Compassion with a capital C, compassion for all life. That's the big difference. Not just for humanity, but for all life, because it's all interconnected. And those are the frameworks which biomimicry teaches. Biomimicry gives you a whole systems view. So you know that, okay, if today I have the responsibility of driving this planet, do I have a license? These guys driving the planet, do they understand how the planet works? Untrained people running the planet.
Now, there are some important words to think about. I mean, if AI can do everything that the intellectual mind can, the only value add we as humans can add is, bringing in the humanness, like the human component of it.
Yeah, they can't do compassion and empathy, right?
Correct.
So now we have to make sure कि boss, HR department अगर compassion और empathy नहीं है तो इस level के ऊपर नहीं जा सकता.
Would be curious to know, Prashant, since going all into biomimicry and in fact helping bring the discipline into India, what are some projects like off the top of your head that you can share with us where, that you are, in retrospect proudest about, about having implemented, those that you would really see as successes, where you brought in elements from nature and then into systems around us?
We've primarily been into education. So very little to show in terms of real projects. But in terms of student projects, there are many. And some of the projects which I feel should be taken forward, I'm somehow not so much now glamorized by these projects that somebody created a water filter inspired by the kangaroo rat's kidneys. Somebody created a child-proof switch inspired by the Venus flower, which opens and closes. There must be hundreds of them because I teach a course at NID, Ahmedabad, and brilliant students, and I'm going there again. What was interesting to me was a project which I was discouraging students to take and they insisted was on gender equality, and another one on trust building in communities. This was in Ahmedabad University, and they wanted to work on gender equality. And even I was wondering, how do we connect biomimicry and gender equality? I said, you said biomimicry should be a question we should ask for everything. So now we are asking it, you can't escape. So the idea was, let's look at nature. And they were very young students. They were not even science students. One was an artist and one was a BCom student. They looked at nature and they had support of a biologist. And they realized that the completely equal social systems in nature, which have almost complete equality, the design principle is a very robust network of feedback and information flow. So even if you look at your neural network, the neuron doesn't have much of an identity. It's like a cross junction. Thousands of pathways are crossing. And this is a pattern they kept repeatedly seeing. And that was interesting, that wherever there is a resilient superorganism or a pack, the networks are extremely very high. They ensure that information and feedback flows one way or the other. And now beginning to understand, they said that that's what ensures that nobody has an incentive to cheat. Now, interpreting that design principle into what do we have to do? I mean, they realize, this works. Even presence of a broken CCTV changes behavior. What is the CCTV? It's a feedback mechanism. So while in our society, we seem to have a lot of information networks. Equal, women have rights. But there is a mitigation of feedback. Why? Because feedback happens to family or social trusted people, and then there is shame and fear. So this was constructed as a project called No More Shame, No More Fear. And using these biological ideas, that how do you amplify these feedback mechanisms so that automatically our behavior starts changing. So for example, if you're in an office where there are CCTVs, open office, you'll see people behavior changes. The idea was it's not morality, but design. And I still think it's a very powerful idea. It's not morality, design. Let's work on the design. If you get the design right, you don't have to worry. So this was something which they designed. And how do you enhance the pathways of feedback, whether through visibility or creating ritual events which are weekly, or creating some ways where people are linked on apps. So this was the project which I felt should be taken forward. It was a very powerful project. Another project was by a group of students who were actually collecting information on, again, a housing project, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. So they were doing post-occupancy data collection, and they were finding that people are not cooperating. They were not getting the right data. So they said that we'll do it in biomimicry. So we diagnosed the project and they realized that it's not that they're not giving the data, they don't trust you. So the question was, how does nature create trust? So they studied various pack animals where why would somebody from another pack trust a member of another pack? Prairie dogs in Africa and other things. And they found that there's a lot of play involved before you are accepted and trusted. Now, what is play in terms of design principles? So that was designed and it was interpreted. So they did a few Garba events and various other things, and they got all the data that they wanted, in fact, even more. Very simple things. There are similar, these are the projects which actually excite me. In terms of physical products, there are so many, people have designed a cart which can absorb shocks based on, how peregrine falcon, it can hover without its head failing, or a hen, its head will not move. So those are actually by the ton. But these are all student projects. And actually true biomimicry will involve a lot of nanotechnology. It's a non-trivial thing, which I keep telling institutes, and it requires serious funding, which we don't have, because the real language of nature is at a molecular scale. I mean, one of the projects even suggested that before people meet for a UN meeting and all the leaders go, they should be mandatorily made to play together. You'll find the outcomes and wars will be less. It's simple biological fact. So people have also designed games that they'll have to play before they come to the table.
Supremely interesting thoughts. I actually originally intended to ask you what would, if someone's looking to pursue a career in biomimicry, where should they start? But hearing all that we have just heard, I think the sense I'm getting is biomimicry ought to be seen more as an underlying philosophy, that guides a whole lot of other disciplines. So I'll amend my question to this. So if someone's looking to expand the discipline of biomimicry in India, what would they do? And if they want to be acquainted to biomimicry as a concept of philosophy anyway, would you have any set of resources that you could guide them to, like a set of must-reads that would hold them in good stead in life anyway, irrespective of what they do?
One thing is, because it's an emerging subject, the area where there's a lot of possibility is education, because most people don't know what biomimicry is. So that's the easy one, that teaching is a easy thing. When it comes to resources, I think Janine's book, Janine Benyus wrote a book called Biomimicry Innovations Inspired by Nature, is a very important book. One should read it. There are many new books that have come up, but I would also encourage people to be a little exploratory in when they approach biomimicry and be open to find their own answers. When I grew up, our college used to have a library where there was a reference section, and all these books you couldn't issue were in the reference sections. That world has expired. It's an expired medicine. That world is changed. Now you just a chat GPT search away or a Google search away. And as you search, new facts are being found. So probably there'll never be one book or a set of books to define biomimicry. I mean, there's a contradiction, right? Bio means life. Life is ever evolving. So biomimicry is ever evolving. So there are people writing books. And I would think besides this book, there's a book called Teaming, written by Tamsin Woolley Barker. That's about bio-inspired organization culture and how to work in teams. But more than that, what I could encourage people, that there are a few websites. One is called asknature.org, which Biomimicry 3.8 has made available for free, where you can ask functional questions of nature and get a functional answer. So these are a few resources which I feel are really important. It's an emerging science. It's an emerging way of life. I think science is the wrong word. It's an emerging way of life. Whoever finds the best answer will probably define biomimicry. There are people who are working on biomimicry and economic systems, money systems, banking. So I would encourage you to also look at the work of Jamie Brown Hansen. She is based in Switzerland. I don't know how many of her works are available. She did a radio show. She did some podcasts on economic systems. I think those are the questions we should be asking. How do we redesign our economic systems? What should be money doing for us? Should we be serving money, or money should be serving us? I think you guys can help bring these voices which are asking the difficult questions to some visibility.
Yeah, I was just thinking, so how do you suggest that we bring together people from different fields to come together to solve one problem? Say, because you said that it involves a lot of nanophysics or material science. So how do we bring people from different fields together? Biologists and physicists and engineers. And how do we build this culture in India so that students from different fields can come together and work on one problem or one project?
What I've realized over the 9 years of trying to do things, the first thing is you've got to allocate funding, significant funding and certainty. So certainty means that if the funding is there, it's there for 5 years. Without that, something as new as biomimicry will not happen. And that's the problem that is happening in India. Certainty is a very, very important design principle. If you look at living system, certainty leads to civilization. If I take certainty away from your life, people don't take a risk. People don't want to investigate anything further. I try this in my student classes that when I give them a certainty that everybody will get an A, you see the kind of imagination that is unlocked. So if they are able to fund it, we went to a couple of people saying that fund our risk taking, just like a tenured professor, that you give them a tenure. Why? Because you want them to take a risk to try something new, right? Similarly, in biomimicry, we need risk capital to provide the people the space to build. Because what you're saying is, I cannot tell you what will emerge because there's no history, there's no data in history or in present. But we are confronted by a funding system which has a few check boxes. अरे fintech में fit नहीं हो रहा, इधर fit नहीं. It's not very difficult. Just create a department, fund it for 5 years and give it autonomy. Create that kind of capital. Life will find a way.
This has been supremely interesting, Prashant. We went in thinking we'd get to understand biomimicry better as a single discipline, but it eventually became a riveting discussion on merging of disciplines, which biomimicry itself is. And then there are your students, like you said, who have gone on to bring in gender studies and merge a whole lot of, blur a whole lot of other boundaries. And the lessons we could take from native earth cultures and those, rooted to the earth. With all that we've said, what would be your parting message to, say, 15 to 20-year-olds who are just about to start taking major decisions around their life, career choices, choice of what majors to take up? What should they keep in mind, basically, before they embark on whatever it is they embark on?
I would strongly encourage everybody to be connected to nature in whichever way they want. It will hold you in good stead, no matter what you want to become. And you will be future ready. Right now, we have the gravity of legacy systems, the mechanical industrial age and its structures. They will take time to morph into what I call is the emerging ecological age. But the essential understanding this new emerging age will understand is respect for all life and overall well-being. That's where biomimicry acts as a very good foundation and makes you future ready. But more than that, I have my own personal view. I believe that while all of humanity is looking for a single answer, Einstein was looking for that single equation. My humble view is it might not be a single answer that will unite us, but it might be a single question. So we can be united with a single question, and united not just as humanity, but united as all of life on this planet. And that question is, what would nature do here? So if we simply agree on this question, that whether you're in Afghanistan or in America or in Antarctica, let's just ask this simple question, what would nature do here? That's why I think biomimicry is very powerful. My view is it is not a common answer, but a common question that will unite us. Not as people, but as organisms with all life.
In terms of messaging for 15 to 20-year-olds, what would you suggest them to do when they just get frustrated at 15 when they don't get through one exam? Because you have gone through a lot of frustration in life and it's taken you time to build over it. But whereas these youngsters at 15-year-old losing hope and thinking that if I have not achieved this much by 15 or 20, I haven't made it in life. So what would be your suggestion to them to overcome that feeling of rushing through life and taking it slow?
Well, there are two aspects I feel to this. One is if you feel helpless and alone, then I think it's an important thing that where does the agency, sense of agency and sense of relationality come from? So I have observed in my life that the more connected you are to nature, the more resilient you will be. Problems which look unsurmountable will become much softer. So my suggestion is that do spend some time in nature, because that's who you are. There was a biologist called E.O. Wilson, and he said that the human mind has emerged in a biocentric world. It is part of the biological matrix. And the way we are being brought up, it's into a mechanical matrix. So it feels very helpless. So we have to reestablish who we are. That itself gives you resilience, and you can then persist in whatever you're doing, because those things might not be in your control. But what is in your control is being who you are. I do this experiment in my classes. I put my students in a visioning exercise, and I ask them to imagine when are they most happy, blissful. Nearly 99% of the people I've done this with by now, they are always in nature, next to a lake, under a tree, on a glass. But the alarming thing is now I'm beginning to see the 17 years old, 16 years old, they are not constructing this memory. A lot of them are not in nature. They are with their mother cooking, in my bedroom, in my blanket. Now, I'm not a psychologist, but to me, is this happening everywhere? But I am beginning to see it in my workshops. Why are they not constructing this memory of nature? They are confusing it with refuge, security. So I think nature, and the people I've found who dream of nature, they are more resilient, happier. Because this is who we are. You might not have conditional explanation, but just being in nature, observing nature, I think is something we should start doing. The other things will happen. I have no guarantees. Financial independence is important. The more transparency we have in human systems is going to remove many of the problems I have. I say it out of my intuitive understanding of nature, because if you'll see, as the scale of an organism increases, you're a pack of 50, 60, you have alpha males. You become a pack of 500, there's matriarchal. 1 million, everything goes away, it's networks. So with 8 billion of us living with the legacy of institutions made 500 years ago, biologically, we should get into transparent networks. Sometimes pain is okay. Keep yourself fit. Go out in nature. Do a little bit of meditation. Things will happen, but the more robust we are, they'll happen better. And let's get to the tipping point where we'll be governed by rules, not rulers. Because at this scale, at least in nature, doesn't work. You want to be governed by rulers? Let's go back to 500 million on this planet. 8 billion, different rules.
Thank you so much for that. It was just so humbling whenever we have, I think both Abhinav and I are gaining so much through this podcast. I hope just beyond what we are trying to do in terms of the mission of the podcast, just meeting such wonderful people, getting to know your ideas and how you see life and what you have learned from it. It gives us such valuable life lessons. So I'm grateful to you for coming on the podcast, and thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prashant,
Thank
for
you.
everything.